Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the Purple Sector's F1 podcast. Today, I'm joined by, myself, of course, Ethan, and we've got F1 editor Matt Koch, the man with much to tell in the world of Drive to Survive today. That's the big talking point, isn't it, Matt? Welcome along.
Yeah, good to be back. We had a cheeky week off, but it's just the two of us this week. But we're down one, but up one in terms of the amount of content that we've got to get through because there's a lot happening this week.
Indeed. Obviously, we've got Drive to Survive that is dropping on this Friday, which is a very exciting thing for a lot of fans. Many also don't really care anymore at this point. We'll jump into a little bit of the content that is within that, as we've got some secret eyes, Matt Koch, who has seen quite a few of these episodes now, and we can hear a little bit about those. But also the bigger talking point and a bit more of the raw Formula One prowess is that we've just had testing, and of course there's not a whole lot to talk about in the way of the timing sheets, but we've obviously seen where teams are doing well, where they're struggling, and just picked up on the vibe in general within the camps. So let's jump in there. First of all, I think we should touch on testing, as that's what's been, and then we'll move in to Drive to Survive. So obviously F1 testing in Bahrain again. First of all, the temperatures were incredibly low. There was a tiny little bit of rain there where some teams did bring their inters, which was wise from them, but obviously you wouldn't really predict it. What did you make of the entire weekend as a whole, Matt?
Testing's an odd one because you sort of keep half an eye on lap times, but for the most part, you put them to one side, and they're a useful little indicator because they'll give you an idea of things like race run, tyre degradation, low fuel running. But even then, you don't know exactly what their fuel load is. You don't know exactly what their engine mode is. You don't necessarily know tyre life, all those sorts of things. So there's a lot of variables. So everything that we say, we've got to qualify with all of that information.
Yeah.
That said, McLaren looks the best. It's not a perfect car by any stretch of the imagination. Lando Norris has said as much. Andrea Stella, team boss there, has conceded that himself. It's got an unstable rear end. Now, what we don't know, and this is going back to my previous point, and also yours, the low temperatures in Bahrain meant that grip was comparatively low. It was gusty as well. These ground effect cars are very susceptible to winds, particularly if you know Bahrain. You go through that first section, and then the right-hander at the top of the hill, and I say top of the hill, it is actually a hill if you walk it.
Yeah.
They're particularly susceptible there because it's a very exposed part of the circuit. So coming around there and then sort of the opposite corner towards the penultimate turn, they get nervous there if it's windy. We certainly saw that with McLaren. So it's not a perfect car, but it does seem better than the others. And then when you look at it in long-run pace, the drop-off that you would expect is just much better.
Yeah.
Or less bad than its rivals. Second and third is nip and tuck really between Red Bull and Ferrari. Mercedes seems to be fourth. Mercedes seems to be third. Ferrari seems to be fourth.
Yeah.
Thereafter, Alpine maybe, Williams maybe.
Yeah.
It's really nip and tuck. Really nip and tuck. And this is the exciting thing because we go into the season. We think McLaren's quick. We think Alpine's quick. We think Ferrari's maybe a little bit slower, but we don't actually know.
Yeah, that's the thing. It obviously, like you said, the timing sheets you keep an eye on, but it's more about watching how the car looks over a lap. And another good thing to take into account is oftentimes to just hide some of their performance. They'll go, all right, this lap we're going to really send it through sector 2 and then kind of coast the rest of the lap. And then behind the scenes, they'll piece it together and sort of go, all right, this is what we would be projective throughout a lap and stuff like that. So it keeps us a little bit in the dark there. But yeah, the McLaren looked very well hooked up. It looked to have a reasonably good front end. I mean, Lando was having to open up the wheel a little bit earlier than usual in some corners. It almost turned in more than he anticipated. But yeah, it's safe to say McLaren would be sort of the favourite still. I don't think that's changed before or after testing. But yeah, the big one being Williams. Now, of course, we're looking at the timing sheets and just sort of a few other things to support that. So you would expect that, okay, Carlos isn't going to be getting pole position. Let's just slow down a second. But it's really good signs, pun intended, I think, heading into the season. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. I was actually messaging a few people at Williams over the 3 days of testing, and they don't want to get themselves carried away. They're really nervous. They're saying, it's only testing. Yeah. But the signs are good. Certainly when you look at the last couple of years, they've been struggling for points. They were in that battle for sixth, but they were an arm's length away from it really last season in terms of the Constructors' Championship. This year, they look very much in the fight, not just for sixth, but potentially for fifth as well. That's a huge step forward in terms of where that team has come from in recent years. And what it does, it also validates all the work they're doing off track, because there's been a huge amount of investment since Doralton Capital bought that team in 2020. They've spent, off the top of my head, 857.2 million Australian dollars. Work that out. That's, I don't know, round numbers, say 500 million American.
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of money to invest in a team. Okay, to buy a team is going to cost probably more than that now, but it's still a huge amount to sink on a team and not get a return yet.
Yeah.
So they are absolutely setting themselves up for the future. They're introducing personnel, systems, machinery. Atlassian is an indication of that. They've got a title sponsor for the first time in 5 years. And that's also a relationship that addresses a weakness in the team. It's not just a commercial deal with a sticker on the airbox.
Yeah.
It actually fundamentally solves a problem that they've had, where they had a 24,000 row spreadsheet to keep track of the car build and development and all that sort of stuff. That gets really messy really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that James Vowes identified when he arrived at the team a couple of years ago. Atlassian solves that problem. Yeah. So there's all these little ducks that are starting to line up, and we saw that in testing. You then see Alex Albon joined by a driver of equal or greater quality in Carlos Sainz. That's a really strong lineup. I like that driver pairing. I think they'll push each other on a little bit. Carlos Sainz, I think, is one of the best drivers in Formula One, massively underrated. So there are some really positive signs in what looks to be a really encouraging year. The question is, at what point does Williams turn off the tap and focus on 2026? Or does it, pour its efforts into this year and give up a little bit of ground there? This is the battle that we go into in 2025 and 2026, because there's this ebb and flow that we'll see in development depending where you are. And Williams, I think, is going to be right on that knife edge as to scoring points is important this year, but it can't give up too much for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Williams is, as you said, they're a team that has sort of historically in the last few years been towards the back of the grid. So, anything above sort of a average performance, you'll look at that and go, they've done really well. And I think that's a big takeaway from testing, is that there is hope there. So we've got some teams that are happier than expected, but in terms of those who maybe haven't seen maybe what they might like to, to me, unfortunately, Aston Martin, I think, would walk away a little bit disappointed, and Haas as well. But the big thing, I think, for Aston Martin is there is hope now. Adrian Newey has started his new job now, so congratulations, Adrian. Well done. I've also just woken up, I don't know if you can validate this, that they've set up a place for him to sleep at the factory. That's very Adrian Newey, isn't it?
Yeah, this is what separates Formula One from pretty much any other industry, because can you imagine sitting there at work, getting to 3 a.m, having done a 16-hour day or whatever it might be, thinking, I might have a quick nap. And then, opening the door behind you and laying down. That's the sort of work ethic that these guys behind the scenes in Formula One have. It's not just going out and racing after a 9 to 5 during the week. These guys do not stop. Aston Martin does not stop. It's invested a little bit like Williams, or a lot like Williams. It's invested a huge amount of money since Lawrence Stroll and his consortium took over the organisation a few years ago. New facility there, impressive, mightily impressive new facility across the road from Silverstone. They've got a new wind tunnel that's coming on board. They've got some massive signings in terms of personnel. Adrian Newey, he's not just the tech guru there, he's a part owner of the team. So he's very invested in that organisation, like he's never been at any team that he's worked at before. You've got Fernando Alonso, one of the GOATs of Formula One, a guy who you give him half a car and he'll give you back 3/4 of a car, because he'll just wring its neck and deliver something that shouldn't be possible. The weak link is testing a little bit. They didn't get out of that 3 days what they really wanted. Particularly the final day was messy. Lance Stroll woke up unwell.
Fernando as well, I think.
Yeah, Fernando wasn't 100% either. So they parachuted Fernando into that car in the morning. Lance jumped in after lunch. Only did 34 laps, and he was too unwell to continue. So Fernando jumped back in. They lost time during all of that. and it just wasn't a particularly impressive test when you've got others like Alpine and Williams who are standing out, and they're sort of shoulder to shoulder with Aston Martin in that midfield.
Yeah.
When you've got those rivals standing out and you're just putting in a performance, it's sort of that absence of star quality that you notice more than the presence of it, as we saw with Williams and Alpine. So I don't write them off.
No.
Because it is only testing, and we've seen teams sandbag before. Yeah. There's nothing to prove. There's no points. There's nothing to win. So let's see when we get to Melbourne in a week and a half.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I'm looking forward to it. Now, let's say, obviously, Adrian Newey's physical input will not be in effect yet. We're going to have to wait a little bit of time to see what comes to fruition there. But, I mean, it is safe to say that his presence brings an energy and just this buzz in the team, and I feel like that's a lift that's especially needed after a disappointing testing. It's obviously the thing is that they're running testing, and it's not the thing of the car was just super slow and whatever. The pace is irrelevant. It's just they probably didn't get as much out of it as they would have liked to, and obviously there were a few things that were just in the way that prevented them from doing so. But yeah, you just look at the amount of laps that some of the other teams got in, and just that data is incredibly valuable. It's a shame for them to not have that, to be able to go back to Adrian now this week and say, look, this is what we've got for you. But it's a matter of time until we start to see some things really get pulled together there, and we'll just have to see how they get started heading into the new season. Now, I want to bring light to what I enjoy most about testing, a bit of a fun one. Is now obviously people sit there and go, how could you watch F1 testing? and the honest answer is I'm not sure, but I do it anyway. Now, when the lights went out and the session was extended by an hour, Koch and I were very upset because we wanted to go to bed. It was already 2 a.m. and we were like, okay, here comes 3. But no, testing's great fun if you treat it like a podcast with an extra bit of visual aid, and it is great. You know, I'm sitting there listening to the lads in the skybox just waffle on about the most rubbish stuff, but it is great fun. And our good friend Kurun Shandok seems to be coming back for his rookie season. Did you see that that whole ordeal about if it was the greatest thing? If you haven't seen it, what have you been doing? But essentially, they read out a tweet. Crofty was adamant on calling Liam Lawson a rookie, at which someone decided to put on the internet at David Croft something along the lines of, If Liam Lawson's a rookie, then so's Karun Shandok. Both have 11 races. Both never completed a full season in Formula One. And that really, really made me laugh. They were besides themselves for about a minute there. I've never heard Crofty cackle like that. And yeah, where was Karun, the question being the answer? Getting his super license. So maybe there's some more to see from him there. We'll have to give him a bit of a hard time about that. But no, testing's good entertainment. It's a bit of fun, and it's a really nice entry back into there are cars on track, and let's get ready for Melbourne. Our first race. We will be there.
Testing's great fun. You can go out and you can stand next to the track and you can watch the cars firsthand, and you pick up things standing next to the track that you just don't see on television. You know, the nuance in the line, the application of the throttle, the way the car brakes and rotates, you know, early, mid, and exit of a corner. You can pick that stuff up when you stood at a corner. At Bahrain, you can walk up the hill towards turn 4 and you've got that one high-speed sequence. You can stand there and you can see the cars change of direction. You then come down the hill and you see the turning and the braking application, the rotation. You get all of that ride quality because there's a couple of bumps through that sequence as well. So you can pick all of this stuff up. And as a result, while we don't know much, because everyone's trying to play their cards close to their chest, we do have a bit of an idea because we have an educated eye to look at this stuff. We can tell you that this car works better than that car. And as a result, we can form a little bit of a pecking order based on the confidence we get from the team, the comments that they make, the car behavior on track. All of these things, these nuances, all feed together to give us an early indication. And then we get to Melbourne, we tear it all up, throw it out the window, and we do it properly for the first time. And it's really only when we get to qualifying that we see all the cards on the table. It's fabulous. I love it.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be there and just see where everyone ranks. But I think that does it for the testing chat. Safe to say there are some positives. Actually, quickly before we get out of it, who would you say it would be the happiest and who would be the most disappointed coming out of testing?
It's a really good question. I think happiest, probably Alpine, when you look at where they were 12 months ago versus where they are now. Last year they arrived with a car that was massively overweight.
Yeah,
It's the same chassis. They've refined it over the 24 season, developed it a little bit more over the winter as well for 25. So it's effectively an A524B, if you want to think of it that way. They've done amazingly well, I think, over the last 6 months or so. So Alpine leaves happiest. Probably Aston Martin would be the unhappiest because, okay, they were only equal with Red Bull for least number of laps, but there was no standout moment for them. Every other team had a little moment, with perhaps the exception of Sauber, of hope or potential. I didn't see too much out of Aston Martin that made me sit up and go, oh, these are one to watch. And heading into testing, I was touting them as a dark horse, and I'm not sure that they'll live up to that. Certainly not when we get to Albert Park.
Yeah. I would have to agree with you on the most unhappy or disappointed would be Aston Martin as well, sort of what we just sort of talked about a few minutes ago with just not getting quite what you would have hoped to get out of the session. Not the pace itself. Obviously, we'd love to see a standout moment, like you said, but just they probably didn't utilize the time as best as they could have. And again, some things are out of their control, and that's just unfortunately the way it goes. But I'd say the happiest is similar to yourself, while also running the same chassis as last year as Williams. Obviously, again, like we said, we also spoke about this a little bit earlier, but Williams, all right, cool. Carlos has been on the top step of the timing sheets. Awesome. But just the car seemed to have reasonable enough pace, somewhat consistently. And above all else, I'm looking at it from less of a performance perspective and just of a morale perspective. Obviously I'm not there, so I can't tell you exactly what's going on in the garage, but just you pick up on an energy, and there seems to be a lot of positive things happening within Williams. And I think that regardless of where they finish in qualifying in Melbourne, if they are making it to Q3 or not, who knows? But I think it's just a really strong way to start off the season, with new people coming into the team left, right, and center. I think they're really going to hit the ground running this year. So I think they'd probably be the happiest coming out of testing.
I think we've probably picked the two happiest teams.
I think we've done a good job.
Whichever the order is, I don't think really matters too much, because what it highlights is that teams that were at the lower end of the field last year have made strong progress.
And what that highlights is that it's going to be even closer this year, all throughout the field. Awesome. Yep. So that's F1 testing sorted. If you didn't know, now you know. And time to head into Drive to Survive chat, a touchy subject for some. Oh dear.
Yeah, Drive to Survive, Season 7, out this week. I've been lucky enough to watch. I haven't seen every episode, I just haven't had time, but I've watched a good chunk of it. And it's, in some areas, it's very good. Very good. In other areas, I felt it was a little bit lacking. Some episodes are absolutely brilliant. Other episodes, you just feel like there's a bit of padding in there. But let's dive into it a little bit more. I'm not going to give you a blow by blow. I don't want to go and spoil it for you.
You're going to ruin it for me, Koch. It's like I don't know what happened last season.
Well, I don't want to spoil the storylines and how they tell it. But what would you like to know? Because they cover some fascinating topics.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that stood out to me was episode 1, which was entitled Business as Usual. Now, the big thing, and it's a very touchy topic, is how much they go into all of the speculation that was around Red Bull at the start of the year. That's a big thing that I think a lot of people are interested in. But then also how they cover the Ferrari announcement. Because if you've seen the trailer, you'll see that, Toto was like, he told me it was going to Ferrari, and I was like, nah, there's no way, sort of thing. So what's episode 1 like?
Episode 1, you're right in those two topics. It does start with Lewis going to Ferrari and a fudged version of that timeline. They really do mess with it a little bit. It's quite confusing to watch, having lived through that.
Yeah.
But then that whole episode sort of gets sidetracked a little bit by the Christian Horner shenanigans that went on at the start of last year. I'm going to be honest, it wasn't my favorite episode.
Yeah.
Of those I've seen so far. It was a little bit confusing because on the one hand, it was trying to tell this story about Lewis going to Mercedes. But then on the other hand, it was trying to tell the story about Red Bull and Christian Horner. And as a result, you got this really confused
They don't really
mixture.
gel well, do they?
No, they don't. They're two very separate storylines, particularly when you consider that they were sort of painting Ferrari out as a Red Bull challenger, but then it wasn't because that was McLaren. And, what they did well, I think, was highlight the stress that it puts on Carlos Sainz. I think that's a story that's done well in that episode. Some of the stress that's on Christian Horner is done well, but they've tread very carefully around a lot of that. And I actually wonder, I don't know, but I wonder if they finished the edit on that episode before everything had been resolved. And I say that because at the conclusion of the episode, there are a couple of screens, just white text on a black screen giving you updates on what happened.
Right.
So it's like they sort of stopped, packaged that one away to get the edit done, to then focus on everything else. Because, it doesn't feel like it tells the whole arc of that story. It all sort of appears and then unravels very quickly and then disappears again. So for what was a major talking point for the first quarter of the season, first half of the season even, it feels like it was glossed over a little bit. And that dwarfs the Lewis Hamilton Ferrari elements, although that's covered a little bit later as well in episode, what's that, number 3, looking out for number 1. And then it's sort of a running theme throughout because Carlos Sainz is involved and he's got his own episode.
Yeah, he'll have a few appearances, it seems.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's episode 1. What episodes of what you've seen so far, what would you say was the best executed? And what would you say is the least well executed? I'm not going to say the worst, not to be harsh, but the least well executed.
Again, I'll qualify, but I haven't seen every episode.
Yeah.
The best executed is by far, it's called Elbows Out. I think it's episode 8. That's the story of Sergio Perez and that fight for the second Red Bull seat. It delves into Daniel Ricciardo, Liam Lawson, a little bit of Yuki Tsunoda, and obviously Sergio's plight. That does a really good job of explaining the motives, the stresses and pressures, and the emotion that the drivers are all going through. And you can see it with Daniel. I don't want to give too much away, but you start the episode with Daniel in one place, and you finish with him in... I've known Daniel for a long, long time. I saw Daniel post Singapore last year, and I saw all the emotions that were pouring out of him there. I've never seen him giving him an interview that is that raw with emotion.
Yeah.
So that story arc is fabulously told. I really do rate that episode because at the same time, you've got the flagging fortunes of Sergio Perez and Christian Horner's stress. You see every element. The one that's perhaps overlooked a little bit, but then I guess so it was by the media, was Yuki Tsunoda. He gets a brief mention.
Yeah.
But he's sort of in that episode almost as a token, he's also in the frame. But never really taken seriously. The whole episode is...
I think that kind of speaks to what's happened in actual fact as well. I think it's a good representation of how everything did unfold.
And that's why it tells the story quite well. A little bit unlike sort of the Horner stuff at the start of the year in episode 1. Yeah. It really does cover the nuance and the drivers of what happened and the levers and where things... It actually opened my eyes a little bit to some of the timeframes involved as well, because the importance of a Silverstone tyre test for Liam Lawson, for instance, the presence of Max Verstappen there, the performance of those two relative to one another, what that did to Christian Horner. There's a candid conversation between Christian and Liam standing in pit lane as Liam's climbed out of the car at that test. And you can start to see it through these interviews that have been conducted over the year. You can start to see pennies dropping all over the place, which creates this lovely, really well executed, multifaceted story that all weaves together to a lovely climax. So, I mean, we all know Liam got the seat, but it's fascinating. It really is. Yeah, it really. I rated that one highly.
How did they cover the Singapore exit? Did they really
Didn't touch it at all? Didn't touch it at all. There is an episode specifically on the Singapore weekend. They give 5 drivers basically phones, and they go and record their experiences for the weekend. So it's
nice. That's a bit
off
fun.
the top of my head, it's George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, and Lando Norris.
Yeah.
Yep. So the five of them have cameras, and they sort of weave that together.
Okay.
Because these are kids kids by my standards. These are kids who grew up together.
Yeah.
They've got a relationship that stretches back to karting. So it's sort of fun to see their take on things, their reaction. There's some really hammy manufactured stuff, and that's throughout Drive to Survive. It's sort of ubiquitous these days, where they're having, spare of the moment conversations that seem very heavily scripted. Jerry Halliwell asking Christian some really weird, spousal conversation. So what do you think of your drivers this year? Yeah, it doesn't feel right. And there's a few of that, few of those in there as well. But in terms of Daniel's exit, like in terms of that elbows out episode, nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I thought that was strange because there was an opportunity, even if it was just for some overlay and B-roll, some really good imagery of Daniel getting that guard of honor reaction that he did in Singapore, the time he spent in the cockpit savouring the
I thought
final
that was a
moments of his
very
career.
cinematic thing.
Yeah, and they just didn't touch it at all.
Interesting.
It was, if I was going to really pick fault with that episode, it was a little bit anticlimactic that way. I was waiting and expecting it. But even still, it was a very well told story, and I think they respected the players involved, which is not something that's always been the case with Drive to Survive. They've over dramatized things at times. So I don't think they did that with that episode.
Yeah.
That said, the very next episode, I think they did try and squeeze a little bit too much milk out of the cow.
Yeah. Which was?
So it's under new management. It's basically the story of Haas and Alpine. And what they try and do is create this rivalry between them.
Yeah.
And in reality, throughout 2024, there was no rivalry between them, really, because Haas was fighting for sixth in the championship. Yeah. And Alpine was, for the most part, at the foot of the table and really only got off that
right at the end
at the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. So there was no long rivalry. They also paint Esteban Ocon as a little bit of a villain because he decides to leave Alpine after 5 years.
Yeah.
So they create him as a little bit of a villain. They use Flavio Briatore to offset that. Jack Doohan makes an appearance, and that's the episode that the trailer grab is from. I'm not going to give you any more than that.
Yeah.
That was a little bit manufactured because they were trying to create rivalries and drama that wasn't there.
Yeah.
But what I did like, after the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, Ollie Behrman deputised for Kevin Magnussen that weekend, remember? Yeah. Behrman comes back to Haas, chats with Ayo Komatsu, and Komatsu says, that wasn't good enough. So you get this first-hand look of a young rookie in, what was that, his second or third Grand Prix? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Highly rated race driver for next year in a hugely difficult race. Remember, the Sao Paulo Grand Prix was
ridiculous.
Was massively wet. He went off the road twice. Get back to the pits, and Komatsu goes, not good enough. You had to stay on the road. You failed to do that.
Tough love.
Yeah. And I think that's a fabulous insight into the mentality of Formula One. It's not just a case of, well done, you saw the checkered flag, good effort.
Yeah.
These are professional athletes. So, yeah, race 3 of a rookie's career, and you're getting that sort of reaction from your new boss. So it really sets the scene and the expectations, I guess, for season 8 of Drive to Survive as well.
And season 2025 of Formula One. I'm very excited. So overall, so far from what you've seen, have you enjoyed what has been put out there?
On the whole, yes. It absolutely ticks the box for what Drive to Survive is designed to do. It's not aimed at a rusted-on Formula One fan like myself or even you. This is designed to capture the interest of the bloke down the pub who's got a little bit of an interest in sport and maybe motorsport, but it's just something that you can put on in the background. That's what captured people's imaginations, particularly during the pandemic. But it's continued to build on that. There's some new initiatives in it. The 5 drivers with cameras and things. In Singapore.
That's cool.
They're still trying to innovate. It gives you that behind the scenes look. It shows the drivers being very candid. It's still that fly on the wall. So it offers the intrigue, it offers the drama, it offers the interest. It tells the story of the high stakes, the pressure that these guys are under. And that's ultimately what Drive to Survive is about.
Yeah.
It's not there to tell you what happened and
accurate
what the news
storytelling.
and stuff is.
People think it's going to be a recount on the season.
And it's not that. Because
it's a reality TV show.
Yeah, the people who are invested enough to want to know that detail already know that detail.
Yeah.
Because they've followed the sport, they've read the news, hopefully on Speedcafe, to stay abreast of all of that stuff. This is designed for people who might tune in a couple of times a year, maybe watch the Australian Grand Prix and Bathurst, and that's their motorsport consumption for the year. This fills that void and hopefully introduces the players and the characters and someone that, you know, these potentially new fans can identify with and get behind. It's building on that F175, turning the drivers into heroes thing that Formula One's been doing for a few years.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Drive to Survive. A lot of the purists are all anti Drive to Survive. All these Drive to Survive fans, you see comments on social media always, did you start from watching Drive to Survive? It's like, why have we got a problem?
Yeah.
Why have we got a problem with it? If this is how you want to consume the sport and this is your introduction to it especially, and then you are going to learn more, I do not see a single issue with it. For me, honestly, I love it because I'll go out there and people will say, oh, what do you do? And I'll explain what I'm doing. And then they're like, oh, I know that from Drive to Survive. And it's cool because you're sharing your sport and your passion with people that usually wouldn't be invested in it.
Yep.
And just growing that community. And sure, let's say that the Drive to Survive fans don't end up watching races and, you know, they'll comment something on social media and they'll get it slightly wrong. That's the course of the game. That's how everything goes in life. If I'm watching the AFL, the Australian Football League, or if I'm watching like the MLS or something, and I don't know what I'm talking about, NFL, no idea, but I'm tuning in for the Super Bowl just to see what's going on, I'm gonna get things wrong, and that's okay. Why are we so righteous and being like, you got this all wrong, you're an idiot, you only watch Drive to Survive? It's great fun, and take it with a pinch of salt. It's not a perfect recount. You know, laugh at the times when they over dramatize it. You know, enjoy the things that are actually really good, as you've said, that the looks behind the curtain that will take away as the more purist and go, this is really cool to see, and just enjoy it. It's entertainment.
There's no right way to get into or consume Formula One or any sport or anything for that matter, and knowledge and wisdom is a measure of information gained, of lessons learned. Just because I've read books and you've watched videos, does that make me more knowledgeable or wiser than you? Absolutely not.
It's the amount that you've consumed overall. Yeah.
It's a shared passion. And that's what this is all about, trying to share that passion with a new audience. I don't think we should be here gatekeeping. That's a really short-sighted way of looking at the sport, because exactly like what we're doing with F1 Academy and what W Series did before that, we're trying to increase the bottom run of that pyramid. Yeah. The broader the base, the sharper the peak, basically. Amen. And the more people we can get into it, the stronger Formula One becomes. Yeah. The more people watch Formula One, the more people get into motorsport, the better drivers we get, the more companies get behind it. We don't have pay drivers. Some of the stuff that we've moaned about for decades goes away as the sport gets more popular. Okay, it might bring in some stuff that purists don't like. Sprint races, for example, points for fastest lap, and those sorts of things.
So
well, yeah, but we shouldn't be here gatekeeping and standing on ceremony too much. And that's why I'm a massive traditionalist. I also think, well, Monaco served its purpose. We don't need an event that is a procession is boring and bill that as one of the biggest and best events of the season.
Add an extra pit stop.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. So, look, let's take a step back. Let's enjoy Drive to Survive as the entertainment product it is. Forget that it's a Formula One show. Take it as an entertainment product. Take it as a nice little appetizer for the season ahead. We're not far away. This will get you through. I think it does a really good job of painting the picture, setting the scene, refreshing your memory on everything that happened last year, and just showcasing some of the rivalries that do genuinely exist in Formula One. Because I guarantee you, there are people in that paddock that absolutely hate each other.
Yeah,
and it's those rivalries that keep the sport alive. We don't want them, in fisticuffs or whatever, but we want to see that niggle. We want to see that fight on track. We want to see them doing better than they did yesterday.
Yeah.
That's what Formula One's about. That's what Drive to Survive paints, and that's what I want to see, just generally in Formula One.
Yeah. And as far as what I want to see on Drive to Survive is the AusGP stuff. I said this to Koch because Big Fella has been in Drive to Survive a few times, I believe, just in the paddock or whatever, doing your job. But I'd love to see the day that I sneak into the background of a Drive to Survive episode is the day that I've made it. To be able to then go, oh yes, guys, I'm on a Netflix show. You can do that already. Put that on your resume. Netflix actor. Done. You're sorted.
Yeah, look, it is a huge show though.
It's very entertaining. I'm always eagle-eyed. I'm like, I know that guy. I know that guy.
It's funny. When you do crop up as the season launches, you get a swarm of messages. I'm saying, oh, did you see this?
Yeah.
And that's how ubiquitous it's becoming now, because you get people who aren't Formula One. I'll go down to Melbourne in a few weeks and I'll catch up with some friends that I've got down there who, 10 years ago weren't interested in Formula One. 5 years ago weren't interested in Formula One. I caught up with them for breakfast last year.
Yeah.
And for 2 hours, all they did was grill me about Drive to Survive. We've introduced a new wave of fans.
The once nerds are now the cool kids. Let's go.
Correct. Yeah, there we go. I'm finally cool. It's taken me however many years.
Redemption.
But that's the thing. This is a positive for the sport. It's marketing for the sport. At some point, it'll run its course, and Formula One needs to look at what it does next to keep itself relevant and prevalent in the in the consciousness of just the general population outside of motorsport.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet. This does still serve a purpose, even if numbers are slowly dwindling.
Yeah. Oh, I don't care. They're getting my numbers. Add one to the list. Beautiful. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I'm jealous. I can see that you've got it on your Netflix account, which is mind-boggling. Friday, I'll have to wait. It's going to be a busy weekend. I don't know how I'm going to squeeze in all of the watching, but I'll do my best. I'm driving to Melbourne, which is going to be a long trip, so whether or not I'm in the passenger seat or not will dictate if I'm able to watch it, of course. But I'm looking forward to seeing it, and the Daniel Ricciardo Red Bull exit episode. I'm keen. I look forward to it. But yeah, I think that kind of covers it for everything for today. I mean, of course, the big talking points were testing and Drive to Survive coming out. We've covered those. There's no fun game this week, which is fine because I've been losing them all anyway. So, or maybe we do it and I get a guaranteed point. I think that's a really great idea. No,
how about you versus me?
Oh dear. Awesome. Well, thanks guys for tuning in for today's episode. I hope you've learned a little bit more about testing and just what to take away from that, because it is hard. And then also, of course, a little peek behind the curtain of what to expect when we see Drive to Survive coming this Friday here in Australia. I don't know if you're in a different country when it will be, but it's at the end of this week. I'm looking forward